Hello and welcome back to my channel. It is the 1st of January today, so Happy New Year. It is my personal tradition to always start off the year with a reread, and last year I did a whole month of rereading, which I then called Read It Again in January, and that is exactly what I'm going to do again this year. I'm going to spend the whole month rereading. I love rereading books, but during the year I am still more attracted to the books on my TBR than the books that I've already read. So focusing an entire month on just rereading really works for me. There's a couple of new books, or new to me books, that I'm reading in January. I am nearly finished with The Women in White, which is a leftover from last year, which I didn't quite manage to finish in 2024. I'm starting my buddy read of The Count of Monte Cristo, which is going to be a project for the first few months of 2025. I'm reading a chapter a day, so that will take us into April, and then I'm also again participating with the TBR spin, so that's going to be a new book from my TBR each month. But other than that, I'm going to do just rereads, and to stay in the style of videos I usually do, I pick the books I read as I go, using a cup, and then talk about the books as and when I read them. In this cup I've put slips of paper with the titles of books on them. I have gone through my read shelves and picked about 20 or so books that I would really like to reread. So at this moment in time, so right now I'm just gonna pick my first book to read in 2025. And it's going to be this one, which is Ghost Ball by Sarah Moss. I really love Sarah Moss's writing, and this is one of my favorite books by her, so I'm very excited to reread Ghost Ball. I have finished Ghost Ball by Sarah Moss, and this was so good. I mean, I picked books from my own shelves, and I only keep the books that I really enjoyed, and from those I only picked the ones I really wanted to reread this month. But still, there is always a chance a book doesn't hold up to a reread, but this one definitely did. However, it's a slim little book, only about 150 pages, and it's about a group of people who participate in a sort of Iron Age reenactment camp somewhere in Northumberland. There is Sylvie, our protagonist, her mom and dad, and then 3 archaeology students and their professor. Now the students' aim is to study the ways of the Iron Age people by living as closely as they would have at that time, with the tools from the time, hunting and gathering food and all that. Sylvie's dad is someone who has a personal interest in the period. He's very much someone who likes survival and living off the grid, and let's say he appreciates the values and the ways of the people who lived back then. He very much wants to be as authentically British as possible. And you soon learn that he is also a bit more fanatical and extreme in his views. He holds very traditional gender views, as in, women prepare the food, the men hunt for the food. He doesn't like any foreign influence, and by foreign he means Roman and Celtic. And it's revealed that he is very cruel and sometimes even abusive to his daughter and his wife. And during the course of this book, which is set over maybe a week on this campsite, his desire to do things authentically gets more and more extreme, and things just get more and more out of hand until it just crescends in this nightmarish climax. And this is just such a chilling read. It's so dark. I feel like it's a good thing it's so short, because it's so uncomfortable and there's a tension that you cannot keep on experiencing for much longer. I think Sarah Moss really is a wordsmith. This is one of those books where every sentence matters. There's not a word out of place. It's very carefully crafted. She manages to weave in so many ideas and themes in this book. The relation of gender and power, class differences, family dynamics, identity, self-discovery, history, nature. There is so much in this book. So yeah, this was an excellent, albeit horrible, start of the year. Okay, let's pick my next book. So I've got my cup again. Let's see what my next book will be. Let's go for that one. And that is Cat's Eye, and that's a book by Margaret Atwood. So I read Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. I have read quite a few of Atwood's books, although not nearly all, but this definitely stands up as one of my favorites. It's a book with dual timelines. We have the current timeline, which is set in the late 80s when this book was first published. And we meet Elaine. She's an artist and she's about to have an exhibition. Sort of an overview of her work so far. She's been a rather controversial artist. There's a big feminist theme in her artwork, and she's kind of reflecting back on how her past has informed her art and where she now is in life. And then the second timeline is Elaine as a child, starting just after the Second World War. Her father studies bugs. I know that has a proper name that I can't remember right now, but it does mean that the family lives quite a nomadic lifestyle. There's a lot of traveling around, a lot of camping. At some point the father gets a job at a university, which means that they move into an actual house, but still during the summer months they are on the road again, and then they return when school starts up again in September. And that's sort of how their family cycles through the years. And one of the central parts of this book, and one of the most formative things in Elaine's life, is her friendship, although, you know, would you call it a friendship, rather a connection or bond with this trio of girls, Grace, Carol and Cordelia. Cordelia is the newest member of this little clique, but soon she becomes the girl who they all revolve around. Elaine desperately wants to be their friend and she seeks their approval, but Cordelia is cruel in a way that only girls can be, and she constantly has these unpredictable rules that Elaine has to follow to deserve her friendship. There's a quote I feel perfectly sums it up, when Elaine is thinking about you know, when her own daughter was that age. Let me find it. She says, most mothers worry when their daughters reach adolescence, but I was the opposite. I relaxed. I sighed with relief. Little girls are cute and small only to adults. To one another, they are not cute. They are life-sized. Yeah, I feel that really encapsulates that part of the book. I think in this book, Atwood perfectly captures the politics of friendships, especially between girls, the way girls can be calculating and mean, how what is right and what is wrong in the eyes of girls is completely arbitrary. Elaine is constantly on her guard. She always feels like she's being judged, which she in fact is, and even though there's a point in the book where she stands up for herself and she breaks off this friendship with Cordelia, she can never quite let go of that feeling. of seeking Cordelia's approval, of living her life as a performance, of always having this idea of being watched. Cordelia actually moves in and out of her later life a couple of times, and things don't end up so well with her. We learn that Cordelia maybe didn't have an easy childhood herself, making her behave the way that she did. And I think this book is a very interesting exploration of how our childhood relationships with our parents, our siblings, our friends influence us in later life. I really appreciated how it worked with the dual timeline, because we have Elaine reflecting back on her life, but she doesn't remember everything clearly. We as a reader have just read about her childhood, but for Elaine in the present, those events were like over 40 years ago. So she's a little uncertain on the details, but I found it really interesting to see what kind of memories and what kind of feelings remained and how they changed with hindsight. Yeah, I was very impressed with this book and Atwood's ability to capture a life with all its complex layers. I always love her writing, I love her style and her choice of words. I don't know if I would recommend this to anyone, because it's kind of a slow book, and maybe it's a book that you need to put a little bit of effort in, but I really enjoyed it nonetheless. Okay, so that was the second book I read in 2025. Okay, the light is doing all sorts of weird things, but yeah, that was Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood, and I am now gonna pick my next book. Got my cup again here, so let's see what I'll be reading next. Let's go for this one, and that is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which is by Carson McCullers, and it's one of my all-time favorite books, even though I've only read it once, so I hope it will still remain one of my all-time favorites. So I just finished reading The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. In the last clip, I think I said it is one of my favorite books of all time, and now maybe it isn't anymore, and I think I'm okay with that. I mean, I still really enjoyed this, and I loved it, but it just didn't have that, oh my god, this is an all-time favorite kind of feeling anymore. But then again, is it fair if I read it together with other all-time favorite books and sort of compare them to each other, if normally I would maybe get one or two all-time favorites in a year, and now reading them back to back. Anyway, this is Carson McCullers' debut novel. It was published when she was only 23 years old, and it centers around a deaf-mute man named John Singer. He works at a jewelry, he eats his 3 meals a day at a local cafe, and for some reason he kind of draws this group of people around him. You have the owner of the cafe, a young girl who lives in the town, this guy who's always drunk and who also comes to the cafe, and also the black doctor of the town. They don't really mingle as a group, but they all individually pour out their hearts to Mr. Singer. And even though he can't hear them and he can't talk back, they all find a great comfort and inspiration in his company. It's a kind of book that has a lot to unpack. Singer is almost like this Christ-like figure in this book, gathering his disciples around him. They come to him for guidance, but since these conversations are always mostly one-sided, it almost becomes like a prayer. Each of them has their own frustrations with the world, whether it's racism, capitalism, gender equality. They each have like their own representation of what kind of struggle they have. It's presented as a personal struggle, but it's clear they represent bigger issues in society. It's a book about communication, or rather a lack of communication, and what happens when a conversation is only one-sided. It's about the effects of isolation and what it means to be a part of a community. Yeah, like I said, it is definitely a book where the more you think about it, the more there is to talk about, and the kind of book where you could focus on a different thing with each reread and you'd get completely different things out of it. And I think maybe it felt like a bit too much for me this time around. Like the book is too short for what it wants to do. I really like Carson McCullers' writing style. Like I said, she was only 23 when she wrote this, and I think that shows. It kind of has this juvenile tone sometimes, but I mean it in the best way possible. I'm thinking of the right word. It's not innocent, it's more like refreshing or genuine or unspoiled. I think her voice is very uniquely hers, and to manage that at such a young age, I think is really remarkable. She gives voice to a wide range of characters in this book, and she handles that with a lot of respect towards each of her character. And she really captures what makes a person. I feel like Dr. Copeland, the black doctor, is one of the more authentic black characters written by a white person. Her other characters are also very well done, and I think Carson McCullers absolutely shines in her depiction of young girls. Yeah, I think I enjoyed the beginning of this book a lot more than the end. I loved really getting into all the characters and the way Carson McCullers sets a scene and draws the background and the setting of the story is really, really great. But along the way I kind of started to lose interest, especially the last quarter of the book or so. I just got a little confused with all the storylines, and I couldn't quite keep up with where we were. And yeah, I was just a bit bored and kind of ready to be done with this book. I also have to say that the N-word was used a few times in this book. I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and say it's a depiction of the time. This book is both set and written in the 1930s in the Deep South of America, and in this book the word is only used in speech and never in description, but yeah, definitely something you should be aware of. So yeah, I don't know, now it almost feels like a little bit of a negative review, but that's not what I meant to do, because I still really, really love Carson McCullers' writing style. I would still love to read everything she's ever written, but I think this book has been surpassed by The Member of the Wedding in my ranking of her books I read so far. So yeah, that was The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and I'm gonna pick my next book to read. So of course I've got my cup again, and my little rainbow cup, and let's see, let's go for this one, and that is, oh, that's interesting. And it's Names for the Sea, which is also by Sarah Moss. I read Ghost Hole earlier this month, and Names for the Sea is her memoir of her time when she lived in Iceland. So I finished Names for the Sea, Strangers in Iceland by Sarah Moss. This is a travel memoir, I guess you could call it. In 2009, Sarah Moss got a job teaching at the University of Iceland. So she moved to Reykjavik with her husband and her 2 small children, and this is her account of that year. Sarah Moss is a writer of literary fiction, so this is beautifully written. I always really love her style of writing, so I knew I was going to be in good hands in that regard. Obviously I have also read this book before, so I knew I was going to be in good hands. But I also really enjoyed what she talked about in this book. I think she captures really well what it is like to move to a different country, and just getting to know the daily grind and like the small habits of other cultures, like what kind of food you can get at the supermarket, where do you buy stuff like, say, light bulbs, how about daycare for the children, what's the best way to commute to work, all these things that are not really something you really think about at home, now becomes something new and something you need to figure out. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading about that, and having lived in a few different countries myself, this is something I definitely recognized. She also goes a little bit more into Icelandic culture in general, rather than just her personal experience. She moved there at the height of a financial crisis, and one thing she is interested to find out is how it affects the Icelandic people. She learns that Icelandic people are very proud to be an equal nation, and to a lot of them it is a shock to find out that there are more and more people who are dependent on things like food banks, and there's a lot of shame around it. There's this whole part about second-hand shopping, where she explains that the Icelandic identity is so much one of being equal, that even though there are, of course, poor and rich people, they don't acknowledge it that so much. At least they don't put a value on it, and the idea of someone else buying your discarded furniture or clothes or anything is really horrifying, or at least it was at that time. I'm not sure what it is like now. Sharing things with family or neighbors or friends is fine, but knowing that a stranger will buy things that you don't want anymore just reveals too much that things are maybe not as equal as they think, and that makes Icelandic people uncomfortable. So yeah, those are really the kind of things that I love to learn about a culture. Another thing I noted down this time was this idea of saying thank you. Sarah Moss is British, and the British, of course, are very big on their please and thank yous. But in Iceland, she learns that people don't say thank you as much, and that's not considered rude. For example, if you are at a dinner and you ask someone to pass the potatoes, Icelandic people won't say thank you when you get the potatoes, because they are there to eat the potatoes are there to be eaten. So why would you say thank you to something that is just a given? It's just the way it is. Yeah, I really love learning those kind of things. It definitely makes me want to travel and learn about other cultures. I definitely have an itch to live abroad again. It ignited a bit of restlessness in me, which I'm not sure is a good thing yet. I also really enjoyed her writing about the Icelandic landscape and the weather, the relationship the Icelandic people have to their environment. There's a volcano eruption when she's there, or a volcano is spewing ash, and she talks about how that interrupts her life and people's lives. She talks about the folklore in Iceland, the belief in hidden people and superstitions around that, and she visits several people who claim they can see the hidden people. So yeah, I really enjoyed this just as much as I did the first time around. Obviously this is now over 10 years old, and Sarah Moss was there in 2009, and so I don't know in what way things have changed in Iceland since then, but I love how it really captures a moment in time, seen from the eyes from a stranger, and I would highly recommend it for that. And that's that for January. There's actually a few days left in the month, but I also want to get started in my TBR spin book for February, because that's quite a chunky one. So I'm gonna end the video here. I had a great time rereading these books. I'll try and get some more reads in throughout the year, but I am definitely planning to do like a whole month of rereading again in January next year, because it really feels like such a treat. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me about your reading in January. Is the year shaping up the way you wanted to? Please leave any thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.